news expected from Moderna with the advisory board meeting today on their recommendation, combined with the discovery that extra doses were found within the initial Pfizer shipments to help Operation Warp Speed. Do you think that will help them hit the 20 million doses goal by the end of the year that they've been proclaiming? I just asked Moncef Slaoui a couple of days ago, and he said they're still on track despite the supply chain problems with Pfizer.
Well, what the U.S. government has been promised is 100 million doses in total from Pfizer, some of that to come by the end of the calendar year, some in early 2021. 100 million doses means 50 million people vaccinated. And if we have 6 instead of 5 doses per vial, that means that you would go up to 60 million instead of 50 million people vaccinated. That is certainly helpful. That's an improvement. But you have to remember, we have 330 million people in this country. And so that inches us towards that goal, but it's not a game changer.
And Moderna is supposed to have twice as much as the initial amount that Pfizer had. If it gets approved, if it's approved, this week, and if it starts rolling next week, which seems likely, according to everything we're hearing so far.
Yeah, and I think this is really promising. They have very similar technologies, very similar levels of efficacy, essentially the same. And I think what is helpful with respect to the Moderna vaccine is that it has also been shown to be stable at temperatures that are more typical for vaccine storage, so not the ultra cold temperatures that the Pfizer vaccine requires. So it means it'll be easier to distribute the Moderna vaccine, for example, in rural areas, regular doctor's offices that don't have those ultra cold freezers.
And we did hear about 2 healthcare workers in Alaska having what they called fairly minor reactions, allergic reactions, but one of them at least was in the hospital overnight with IV meds, had to be repeatedly medicated before that person came out of what appears to be anaphylaxis. And supposedly that person had no prior experience with anaphylaxis, so would not have been someone heeding the obvious warnings that have already been attached to the Pfizer vaccine.
Right. Well, this is also why we're currently advising that everybody who's vaccinated remain at the vaccination facility for observation for at least 15 minutes after receiving the vaccination, because they do have on-site epinephrine or the EpiPens that we use to treat such a reaction. It's also important to remember that even if this is a 1 in a million kind of reaction, when you're going to be vaccinating as many people as we will be, again, 330 million people in this country alone, 1 in a million translates to 330 anaphylactic reactions. So you are going to be hearing about this. This should be no surprise. I think the key is to remember that this is something that we can treat and that no one has had serious complications from. This is something we can manage.
The states, of course, have authority in our system to order different priorities as to who gets the first vaccines after the healthcare workers, the nursing home residents. There are different definitions of emergency workers, though. We're seeing competition now from groups representing firefighters, food workers, teachers, and arguably Black and Latino communities who have had such disproportionate results being affected by COVID and deaths, or older Americans with comorbidities. So what about minority communities? Shouldn't they have a place high up in line? How do you make these decisions between different groups, and won't different states obviously have different priorities?
Well, certainly different states will have different priorities, in part because they have different industries. And so the specific critical infrastructure groups that are in any particular state may not always be identical. The other thing with respect to communities of color is they do tend to be concentrated in those critical infrastructure jobs, those frontline essential worker jobs. And so by prioritizing those professions, you are, in fact, prioritizing the needs of communities of color who have been hit so hard, in part because they are in those jobs.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.